see the path to the championship. I can see it.
Coca-Cola 600 belongs to Ryan Blaney.
Blaney's learned how to win over the last couple of months.
Blaney! Harmon! They spin behind him! It's going to be Blaney!
We're going to win this thing.
Ryan Blaney is going to win his way into the championship for...
You have to run a perfect race to get it.
Ryan Blaney is a NASCAR Cup Series champion!
What an unbelievable year. What an unbelievable playoffs for us.
This is the Team Blaney Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 140 of the Team Blaney Podcast. My name is Adam Rogers, and alongside me is co-host Steve Mez. This podcast is brought to you by fans for fans. Steve and I have been following the drivers of the Blaney racing family for 2 decades, and Team Blaney itself launched on social media back in 2014. Each weekly episode of the show offers an in-depth analysis of Ryan Blaney's latest NASCAR Cup Series race, plus news, notes, and special guest interviews all throughout the year. This week, we break down Team 12's run in the Geico 500 at Talladega Superspeedway. Steve, welcome back for another episode of the show. Talladega spring race is in the books. And I don't know, once again, mixed feelings about the action on track, maybe about the results. But the one positive, I guess, of the weekend is somehow, some way, the rain moved out of Alabama, and we got the race in as scheduled.
Yeah, I was going to use walking on sunshine, but I put up a TikTok with you by surprise there because it was that kind of cleared up, and all of a sudden there was sun, and you could see clearly now. The rain was gone, and yeah, it was a good weekend for that all around, because then you got Saturday's events too were all there was a chance of rain later in the day, and this and so forth, and you got all your got your qualifying in and got to watch that race too. So really fortunate that the rain was at the time it was at, and it stopped, and then 3 wide fuel mileage racing. Woohoo!
Yeah, there's just that one scary moment. We're standing on the grid before the race, and one cloud moves over the track, and it's like sprinkling, and then it gets a little bit heavier, but then it just kept moving on. And then that was the end of it. That was the last band that was coming through, and it was sunny and pretty warm. I mean, that was the other concern. There's a point when it was going to be under 50 degrees, for the whole race too, which was kind of going to be odd because it was a little bit warmer the last couple days before the front moved in. So yeah, can't believe it. The rain kind of stayed away both days, got all that action-packed racing in, and cool weekend, cool car too with the Wabash colors on it.
Yeah, some people it was hard to see because it's not what you're used to seeing on TV. And if you're tuning in and you didn't know, then you see that yellow out there and you don't realize it's the 2 car. But I like the Wabash. I like any of the other sponsors just because it gives a little break. The Menards is it's yellow and a different hood, yellow with a different hood. At least when you get these other sponsors like Wabash and Worth, you get a whole different car. And it was a cool paint scheme. And the thing is these sponsors only, they do 1 or 2 races a year, so it's their whole shebang, for that 1 or 2 races that they're out there. So they're all excited to be there. As you found out, you got to meet some of the people from Wabash, and by being at the track this weekend, and I'm sure they were excited too.
Yeah, those folks were having a good time hanging out with the team, hanging out with Ryan pre-race. One thing to note, you mentioned about the 2 car. We just got done watching the replay of the race, something we like to do, and I think you guys like to do after you've come home from a race weekend. Yeah. And there's a point actually in the broadcast where Chase Elliott, they were talking about some communication he was having with his spotter and stuff to note that the 2 was not Ryan. Because they're friends and everything, but I think Chase also knows, Ryan's really, really good at this style of racing.
Yeah.
So, but it's worth noting because, not even, just for the competitors, but I can't tell you how many races we've been to where even the radio and broadcast people will start calling out stuff where that's actually Cindric when it's Ryan, just in that off week where he's not, in that yellow Menards car. Shout out right away, and I brought this up, I think, last year too. But shout out to NASCAR and the people that put together the fan rewards program, because if you did follow Team Blaney this week, we had a little bit more closer access to some things while we were at the track. And a lot of that was because we cashed in some points we had by saving up all throughout the year for fan rewards to get like a VIP experience that included the photo in victory lane. There's lots of other things you could do with that. But the cool thing is if you know the kind of access and everything you can get from that, could hang out in the Cup Series garage throughout the weekend, before qualifying. If there's practice that on that race weekend, you can kind of hang out around practice and stuff. We stayed out on the pit road during qualifying. On race day, again, got to walk through the garage on the morning, hang out on pit road during the race. We kind of hung around the 12 pit box, got to catch up with several of our past Team Blaney podcast guests, Chris Conklin, Ryan Flores, who is just on, Greg Sorber, who we just had on this year as well, and a few of the other guys. So it was great to catch up with them, see how things have gone for them since last time we spoke, and give them a fist bump, wish them some good luck. I can't say that necessarily my luck wishing helped anybody this week, but it's always great to see those guys, let them know that there's, fans and everybody that are pulling for the guys behind the wall too.
Yeah, it was cool. You sent some pictures to me both days, and as a matter of fact, tonight after we're done doing this, send me everything you got again, just in case there's some I haven't seen yet. And maybe I'll put together a TikTok montage of all those because that access is pretty incredible. Being able to, be up close like that and be able to talk to some of the guys. They're amazing too, because they really will, if they're not in a hurry to do something and there is just a hair of downtime, they will talk to you for a minute or two and say hi. And like you said, we've had some nice access where we have gotten to talk to them already. So yeah, it had to be a pretty good weekend for you guys, being able to see all the things you saw, except for what the finish was. But then again, you went to victory lane too, so taking a picture with Tyler had to be kind of fun too.
Yeah, that was a great experience. And yeah, I will double down on what you said. If you do have the opportunity to have access like that, these guys are, it is like going to their workplace. So pick and choose times. If somebody's, working on putting their pit gun together, you might not want to walk up and start chatting somebody up, because they are getting prepared to do their day jobs. One other thing to note this week was the fact that crew chief Jonathan Hassler was not on the box for the 12 team. For good reasons. He and his wife welcomed a new baby girl this week, so he got to stay home and enjoy that moment with his family. So that did put another past guest of the Team Blaney podcast, engineer Tony Palmer, led the way, and they also had Travis Geisler from Team Penske was also up on the box too, helping things out. So a little bit different leadership throughout the weekend, but we knew Tony and everybody was ready for the job.
Yeah, it was interesting because the announcement Saturday, the way it was done, it was like top secret information till the last minute. Basically, everybody got to the track and realized, oh, wait a minute, Jonathan's not here. And it was kind of like I think in Ryan's press availability that he actually mentioned. And at first, people were like, oh, she's about to have a baby, and then some other story came out and says, oh no, she just had the baby like recently. So. Who knows time-wise where that was, but it was kind of a weird thing, like the way they released the information to people. And the media is pretty good at putting it out there. I think Bob right away was one of the main guys, and maybe Jordan Bianchi too. But truthfully, Tony, if you know anything about how it works, Tony is helping on the box as the lead engineer, and he's doing all the calculation for this fuel mileage stuff anyway. So having Travis up there is basically having that extra guy to bang, I want to say bang heads with, where you turn and talk and figure things out with. But they also, like you said, I think Jonathan was back at Penske headquarters too, in their war room. So it wasn't much of a difference. Communication might have been a little bit different during the race. They cleaned it up a little bit as the race went on, but for the most part, you're going to get the same performance from the team that you got, whether Jonathan was there or not. It was, I want to say, a good weekend for it to happen, but of all the tracks, of all the ways that the racing is done, it was probably one of the better ones because there wasn't going to be a lot of pit strategy as far as like 4 tires, 2 tires, that type of thing. It was going to be gas. How much gas?
Yeah, unfortunately for you, no practice this week. So I know that's your favorite part of the weekend. We didn't get to see any of that, but super speedway races, no practice. They went straight into qualifying. And how did things go in qualifying?
Yeah, I did a lot of notes here on qualifying. He qualified 21st.
Thorough report, just as I always
thank you very much. The 34 got the pole, and the 5 car. I think the story of Saturday was the 5 car. There's something about the something with the roof rails again.
While they were pushing the car out for qualifying, and it's so funny because again we're in the garage. And I think I took a picture of them pushing out, and I actually need to probably go back and look at that picture see if anybody's hands up on the roof rails, because we watched them push that car out to the grid for qualifying in the garage, and then it comes out. I don't even know if they actually made it all the way out or not. We didn't follow the car,
no,
but they end up disallowing them from even participating in qualifying. So that was really odd. They pushed it back. It was in its garage stall the rest of the way, but yeah, it says the crew it passed inspection. So I guess there was other roof rail issues this weekend, or in the I don't know if it was this weekend or at least in the past this year. I think it was with the SHR cars.
Yes, correct.
But in this instance, they passed inspection with the roof rails. It was an official, or the cameras in the garage or something saw a crew member like manipulate them as they were pushing the car to the grid. So it's almost like the old thing where the gas man used to kick the side of the car in or something like during the race, or the tire changer or carrier would kind of flare the fender, or flare that skirt out or something like that. I mean, but I don't know. I guess thought they were being smooth about it, but it kind of shows you that the NASCAR is kind of all knowing, all seeing, and you can't necessarily get away with that. And I think these teams they try things like little things like this because the way the cars are. They're working in such a small box that anything, tiny thing could be an advantage.
Yeah, so it puts them to the rear, and then they're going to get a pass through at the start too. And like somebody maybe in the Discord chat on Sunday morning was like, "Oh, he's done," and I was like, "Well, if you think about it, as long as nobody else goes a lap down between there and the end of the first stage, well, he'll get his lap back, and then he's in the mix," and that's exactly what happened for him. So
the other funny thing with them too is they lost like the car chief, and I think somebody else too was suspended for the weekend. Yeah. And on top of that, they had 2 pit crew members suspended for the weekend from the previous week when they lost a wheel. So
yeah,
there was a lot of backup folks working on the five crew this week.
Yeah, Larson made a joke about he was going to have to get out of the car and jack the car up, and so we get to Sunday. And it's stages of 60, 120, and 188, 8 sets of tires, fuel run of 39 to 43 laps. And I put that in quotation marks because they found a way to stretch that. Pit stall 24 with the 31 behind. He's behind the 31 and in front of the 78, which is advantageous because the 78 ends up a lap down. So like I said, Tony's on the box here. They run pit road and they tell him to back it down 1 light. This is funny because it's not even the penalties that come up later on didn't matter what light they were on. So they start off with a third line starting within the first lap. Ryan goes outside with it, but you notice that right away he's not pushing anybody or trying to push anybody. And we are once again watching with the in-car camera. Thank gosh for the in-car camera. They had one for the network so they could change the angles. But the best part about it was when they did show it out front, it was the one on top of the car, not through the front windshield. So you could see a lot better what was going on. The front windshield's a lot harder because you can't necessarily see over cars through that front windshield. By lap 3's in the inside lane, back to 30th. And I've got fuel save mode written down here. because he does. He backs off to the back basically, and just make sure he doesn't lose the draft. The 31 leads lap 7. We got all these different lead changes, and I've kind of wrote down different numbers just so you hear the numbers because it's all kind of different guys. But he's back to 35th, and at lap 8, all the way back to 37th. And at that point, like I said, 38th is Larson, and he's in the pack 1 lap down. But Tim does say it's simmered down a little bit up there. For lap 15, the 14 takes the lead. Lap 18, the 51 is out front. Ryan's in 36th. And the funny thing is 36 is 1.76 seconds back. So it's less than 2 seconds back to last place. It's really not that far. Lap 20, Ryan says they're slowing the pace here. I think I'm in a good spot if my plan works. So this was a plan from the get-go that they wanted to conserve as much as they could, so that when they hit pit road, that's less time on pit road, and hopefully jump a bunch of guys while they're on pit road. Lap 25, the 19's leading, and like I said, Larson's in the pack. They're 1 lap down. Lap 30, still in the tail of the middle lane. Lap 32, he tries to go to the high lane a little bit, starting to move up a little bit, because I think part of the plan is not just to conserve from back there, but when it comes time to pit, move up a little bit so that you're in the mix with the guys you're pitting with. And then you're, like I said, you're able to jump them based on the amount of fuel. Ryan, we're at lap 34. Ryan asks like how many more laps, and Tony says they're like +3 from the number they started with. So at this point, they know they can go probably like 3 more laps on fuel than what they originally thought they were, just based on how much they've saved already. Lap 40, the 78 takes the lead, but then he hits the wall, scrapes the wall, but luckily doesn't cause a caution. And he doesn't have any fuel pressure, and he comes to pit road. So he had a whole plethora of things happen there. Lap 42, the pitting does start. He's up to 27th there at the high lane. Lap 43, there's some more pitting. The 11 spins out. Coming to pit road. Luckily, they don't throw a caution here either. And then the next lap, Brian does pit. It's 3.5 seconds of fuel. That's it. I didn't go back and look at the pit times, but they're just 3.5 seconds. That's it. They get in there. As soon as Chris plugs in, they take the fuel, and then Tony tells them to go. By lap 46, the cycle completes. He's all the way up to 8th with the 9 leading now. And like I said, he jumped all those cars just from 3.5 seconds of fuel. At lap 48, he's now pushing the 21 with the 6 behind him in the high lane. And lap 50, the 2, the 21, the 12 are all up in that high lane. The 5, the 9, and the 24 are in the low lane. So Larson is actually technically trying to race to get his lap back by being out in front of the leader if he can. At lap 53, he wants the gap to the front. And this is something that people, who listen have said, oh, well, him and Tom, he told Tim something there. Well, yeah, what Ryan likes is he likes to know the gap of the car in front of him to the next car. So like if the 21 is directly in front of him, but then the 2 is in front of the 21, he wants to know that gap up there, because then he can judge how hard or how often to push the 21 up into the 2 and not forcing the issue. Because if there's like no gap and he goes up there and pushes the 21 into the 2, it could cause an accident. So that's something he kind of asked Timmy for that gap more often. Lap 55, the 5 gets in front of the high lane. Like I said, he's trying to lead the whole thing. That way he won't technically be a lap down. He would actually just, get his lap back and be at the tail end. 56, lap 56 here, the 2 leads, the 21, the 12 are behind him. So Ryan's at about 5th here, and the 6 is actually pushing Ryan. And then we get to the end of the stage here, and the 2 wins the stage. Ryan ends up 4th. And, Ryan says something about Harrison, but then he, the way he was pushing Harrison and then Harrison pushing ahead, and then he had to kind of go around Harrison because something happened where Harrison lost the push, and it was really kind of a weird looking thing. And he told He told, I don't know if I have the notes here, but he told, down here below, he told Tim that if that happened at the end of the race, he would stick with him. In other words, if something like that happened at the end of the race, he'll just keep pushing the 21. But right at that point, he just kind of like made a move around him because he didn't know what was going on with the 21 there. So Ryan doesn't ask for any adjustments here. Tony says 4 tires, they're going to wait on fuel. So what's interesting here is they go in 4th and come out 3rd, but it's a over 12-second stop. So everybody in the field were in the same situation. They all put the tires on, but everybody's sitting there waiting for the fuel for the can to empty out. So
it's just so funny because how much they put into saving on that first run to just to do the 3 seconds, and then they come in and they pit again, and then it's like put the 4 tires on, and Tony still says, "Hey, we're going to be waiting. We're going to be waiting on the can." So,
and everybody did. That's a funny. Like I said, that's a funny thing. Like, but he ends up being the 3rd car off pit road. It's the 8th, the 9th, and the 12th. Tony says, I don't see this playing out much differently. He stick with the game plan here. Ryan, of course, agrees with that. And the leader is the 8 taking the top. Ryan taking the bottom here. And so he's on the front row with the 2 and the 21 pretty much right behind him. That's the perfect spot for Penske to line it up. Restarting at lap 67, and the 2 pushes the 12 to the lead. This was cool. Once again, it's always great when you control the race from the front. But like I said, in these fuel saving situations, they've learned how to do it. Don't get me wrong. The guy in the front has learned how to save fuel, but you can save more fuel the further back you are.
And I was going to mention, I know we'll probably chat maybe at the end about the way the style this race has kind of turned into and what we think about it, but that's what we kind of miss. Now, Ryan has won, obviously, in the fall in this style of super speedway racing, but it's just different. Like, there's a lot of people, even though we're several races into this, a lot of people were confused as to why he would hang in the back all race, because for years we did not see the Penske cars do this. They qualified up front, they raced up front, they stayed up front, they controlled the race, and then usually one of the 3 would have a shot to win. Especially when it was Ryan, Brad, and Joey. Obviously Austin has won a Daytona 500 too. So it's just it's so different now. So it is weird for me too to see Ryan run last for an entire stage and not be battling for the lead, because they've just totally had to flip how things work. So I understand it's weird to see, but again, they've worked the new strategy to success, obviously, because that kicked off, a playoff run to went all the way to a championship in the fall.
Yeah. So at lap 69 here, they're 3 wide. He's in the bottom, 8 in the middle, 16 in the high lane. Shane Van Gisbergen in the high lane. At lap 71, the 10 takes the lead, but Ryan's bottom at 3, but his line starts to fade back, and the guys start to dive in front of him. He's all the way to 12th. By lap 77, still 3 wide. Ryan is 4th car in that low lane, which is 12th place at that point. At lap 80, bottom of 3, 16, P16. Lap 85, the 42 is now leading, John Hunter. And Brian is 15th, 3 wide on the bottom. Lap 90, still bottom of 3 in 17th here. Ryan goes middle behind the 2 car, trying to ride with a teammate for a little bit. Middle 3 all the way back to 27th. By lap 97, middle row, 30th. Once again, we kind of faded to this back here. Now, at lap 99, he moves up as more cars are starting to pit in front of him here, and gets to 26 with the 17 leading. And then at lap 101, the pitting begins, and the 22 takes the lead here. At lap 102, like another wave of cars come through. They still haven't come in yet. Lap 103, they're still staying out. The 7 car here spinning out, coming off of pit road. Ryan's all the way up to 7th as this is going on. Lap 106, they're still staying out in the low lane. And they're P10 here, and the 22 and the 2 are up front. Now, they're lap 107, and there's about 12 cars that haven't pitted yet. And at lap 108, they tell him they were going to pit with the 22 and the 2. And the 11 is leading at this point. And at lap 110, they tell him stay out with the 22 and the 2. And then the next lap, they come in. Now, problem with this is other cars in between Ryan and the 22 and the 2 have come in. There's a little bit of a gap for that next lap, and he's unable to close that gap. And what's bad about this is you want to try to close that gap so that when you do pit, if your fuel strategy is better than their fuel strategy and you take less fuel than they take, maybe you pass them on pit road, and lead them off pit road. But because of this gap, and he's trying to close the gap coming to pit road is what he tries to do. And by the time he gets to the first timing and scoring, he's just way too fast going in there. And he knows it. I mean, he knows it kind of right away. He's really mad. You hear the mad things on the radio, but the mad things on the radio in, perspective of it is not that anything happened, but he tried to execute a play and it didn't work. And now we got to move on from it. And, they come back out. He knows the penalty. He comes back and does the pass through automatically. The good thing is the stage is almost ending. You get back out there as quickly as possible. He should be able to hold on to the lead lap, but he goes back to 35th here and doesn't get a chance to compete. And the 2 cars that he was pitting with, when they mesh back into the pack, they actually are in good shape. And so he would have been right there, probably close to them. So at lap 117 here, the 17's leading. Ryan's back to 34th. But lap 120, the 22 wins the stage there, and Ryan ends up 34th, just with this pit road penalty. And they do discuss, here's the point where they kind of discuss the radios. And there was some sort of issue of communication with Tony to Tim. And Tim wasn't catching everything because of it. But Tony's radio to Ryan worked really well. So that's what they talked about doing the rest of the race. It's just if Tony had information, he's just going to feed it right to Ryan instead of trying to use the other channel with Tim. And it worked pretty well the rest of the race. But it was a little frustrating there because Tim was relaying it, but there's so much else going on. And it may have been one of those things where it's better to hear another voice. And so, going forward, it kind of worked better that way. 4 tires and fuel here. And then they're talking about coming back in to top it off, too. So once again, we're more worried about fuel than anything else. Forget about the track position.
And that really created some weird-looking restarts in this race. I think the first time it happened, I don't remember if that's this time or not, a lot of people were confused, and it looked like someone you mentioned, it almost looked like an old-fashioned restart where there's only and I think it was flopped a little bit. There's more people in the bottom lane, but there's only 5 or 6 people on the outside lane. It's all because if you come in and top off when the choose is happening, you don't get to choose. So you just line up single file, so the field spread out a little bit more when this happens.
Yeah, you're tail end of the longest line because you're going to pit road and it's closed. That's the rule. And it was really weird to watch. You're right, because what happened is the first couple cars that stayed out chose. And then everybody else come down pit road, had to hurry up and get behind them guys before the restart. And they were in a single file line all the way back. And when pit road's closed, almost everybody does come in to top off. And he's 23rd. So it's funny. It's like he had gained some positions on pit road to begin with the pit stop, even though they were waiting on fuel. And, kind of worked out okay. They were still mid-pack here. The restart lap 127 here. The 1's taking the lead. Ryan's in 26th. Lap 129, 2 wide there. Ryan in the high lane, back to 32nd. And then we get a caution for the 20 and the 51. And Ryan kind of gets hit from behind by the 71 during this. So they wanted to know if his tires slid because he was trying to brake there, and he did not. But they says, you know what? Let's check the damage, make sure, because if it crumpled, anything back there, it might affect the tires, So they're going to do a normal 4-tire stop here, and unless they see something and they want to, stop and make sure it's okay. They're talking about, they're pitting, and they're talking about coming back in to top off again, but, and Ryan asked this question: how did people wreck while saving gas? And that's a funny question because, they're not racing like maniacs trying to get past each other. Like we'll see at the end of the race, they're just, all out there in fuel save mode. So why is it that somebody wrecked somebody? And at lap 137, the top eight, it hadn't pitted, but Brian was topping off here and going to be starting single file again. And at this point, they're talking about maybe getting to the end of the race on fuel. Maybe not green, white, checkered, but maybe getting to the end of the race on fuel. And that brings out some interesting strategy later on that keeps that from happening. But they were saving that much fuel. They thought they can get the laps they need in by the end. The restart was at lap 139. The leader was a 14, and Ryan was in 31st. And he said something about Brad was messing around a couple cars ahead of him for some reason in the single file. They almost kind of like lost the draft because of Brad. But it does become 3 wide out front, so they of course get all back together. At lap 142, the 31 is leading. Lap 143, the 34 takes. And at lap 148, he's in 33rd. And Tony says you can make up some track position here if you want. At lap 150, they're running middle with the 41 pushing. They're up to 20th. Lap 151, they're middle 3 here in the 17th, and there's cars pitting. And so as this happens, Ryan moves up to 10th. This is the Toyota strategy. This is something that I don't know if anybody really saw it coming. They
super
had this
smart too.
Yeah, they had this little game plan. They're like, you know what? If we all get together and we pit, we can race as hard as we want to race. And that way, from that point forward, everybody else is forced to come in and get gas because now they got to race with us at some point, or they're going to end up losing to us. And what they figured is it was 3 to 4 seconds a lap faster, just racing in one little pack, 7 or 8 cars, as hard as they could race. And it did it. Kind of was about to force everybody's hand. I really, really, really wish what happens didn't happen because it would have been interesting to see if they tried it, if it would have played out, if the pack would have went a little faster, or if everybody in that pack would have had to come in and get a splash. It would have been really interesting to see how that all would have played out. So lap 151, let's see, this one they're pitting there, the Toyotas. And at lap 155, he's in the low lane up to 14th. And then at lap 156, we had a caution with the 22, the 43, the 11, the 42. Ryan's in 14th. And this is, like I said, this kind of, it screws up their strategy on one hand, but on the other hand, it does work for one guy because he's a Toyota. He stays out while everybody else pits. And they're pretty much just trying to get enough fuel to go to the end here is what they do when they're going to come in and pit here. And at lap 158, they're pitting, and Tony says like a solid 1 second of fuel is all they needed. So they already conserved enough gas. They already knew that they just needed a little bit, and the little bit they needed was just in case there's a green, white, checkered. So as they're coming off pit road here, coming down pit road here, Brian says I was probably speeding. He was in the wrong gear. The in-car camera was pretty obvious. He was passing guy. He passed a guy or two, and I'm like, and he was like on the radio going, oh, and he realized he was in the wrong gear, and I'm like, so he knows it's on him, and then I'm like, okay, well there should be a penalty coming up here, and they figure, okay, well we'll come back in and top off then because we're going to be tail end of the longest line, and then there's a communication from Tim like, hold up, wait a minute, as they're out on the track here doing that lap, and Tim finally comes back on and says, we're not under penalty. Now, I don't remember if TV said that he was penalized. TV might have. I have to go back and rewatch now. TV might have said he was penalized, but for some reason, NASCAR decided he wasn't penalized, which is really,
super
really weird.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, unless there's some weird mix-up in communication or they even just messed up, but like this isn't one of those this is a pretty black and white call. There isn't really room for interpretation here. Like this is all computerized. So it's really weird for them to say, actually, no, you weren't.
You weren't.
You
So,
weren't.
Tony tells him to stay out because this obviously changes track position for them. So just stay out. And yeah, I thought it was really strange. So their number, their P15 here, and for the choose here, the 45 is leading at this point, taking the high lane. Ryan takes the high lane, restart lap 161, top of 3, and something happened here with the 2 car not pushing him, and all of a sudden he just kind of like ends up getting shuffled. He thought he had some help from the guys with him, and then didn't have any of it. It shuffled back to 28th here, and he's pushing the 21 at this point. And lap 164, he's pushing that 21 up in the high lane, and they go try to go middle at one point up to 17th here. It's too wide in the high lane. The 34 is leading. The 5 is pushing Ryan at this point. Lap 168, he's behind the 16 here for a number of laps here up to 18th. And Ryan wants to know what the 22 and the 2 are waiting on, because he's with them and he would do whatever they want to do. Lap 175, Ryan wants to know what the plan is, because they got to make a plan at this point. It's kind of things have gotten turned upside down, And Jim says the 22 says he can't make a third lane. He just goes backwards. So he has no confidence in a third lane. And Ryan wants to find out. He wants to give it a shot. So he tells Tim, see if you can see what the 5 and the 9 want to do. They're not teammates, but they're right behind him. And maybe if he jumps out, they jump out with him, Lap 179, the third lane just won't go. He's back to 20th here, no help. The 41 and the 17 are trying to push, but Ryan is in that high third lane there. Still, at lap 183, the 16 jumps in front of the 9. Ryan's pushing the 9 here.
This is when it almost starts to work. Like I mentioned, I rewatched the race. There's a couple times where they almost push the 16, within like the first 3 rows. And I'm like, maybe it's going to work. But I mean, we saw all race long, the third lane worked like crazy, but it's because the inside 2 lanes were saving. So it's just so hard to get it going. But it looked like there's a possibility. There's a glimmer of hope that kind of kept things exciting for a short period of time.
The intensity ramped up, with Tim. And at one point when he's pushing the 21 a little earlier, he is pushing I don't want to use, what kind of word I want to use. It's just really, really hard on the 21 every straightaway, front stretch, back stretch, front stretch, back stretch. And they go up like 4 cars each time they do it. And they get to the turn, it kind of dissipates and they start to come backward. And then once again, they get and it just seems like it's about to work. And Tim's really telling him, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it. He can take it. He can take it, And like I said, it works for a little bit here. Lap 185, they're moving that third lane. He's up to 16th. But it kind of stalls, and Ryan moves back, back down into the middle for a minute or 2, and then pops back out into the high lane. I thought he was in front of the 8 car at this point, but it just didn't. That lane just died, and it just nobody could push anybody from that lane. It wasn't enough effort there or something. And then we get to the finish, on the last lap with the 34 car. And that whole thing, I mean, he just, it's funny as you hear the radio communication, or he gets out of the car, he's all mad and everything, and you see that, but then give them guys a minute to reflect and think about it. But when they answer their questions, he knows he tried to block. He tried to block six lanes. He tried to go from the top to the bottom to the middle to the top to the bottom. And he just ran out of time and just couldn't block properly. And did it? I mean, I didn't want to say did.
Looked like he lost it to me.
Yeah. It kind of. That's what I was going to say. It looked like he kind of did it to himself. And the bad part was the 6 car was the one car I could definitely root for to win, and he had to slow up just a little bit, just to make sure he cleared that 34 coming past him. And as that's going on, the 45 was full speed ahead, and the 45 goes on and wins. Ryan goes through this melee, and you can, once again, listening to spotters are great stuff. I know more and more people are doing it now. I know, like, the Discord chat's got a lot of guys who listen. But Tim is really good. He's like, get this way, go that way, high, low, this, that, slow down, fast, and he goes through, and then the TV the TV at first shows him like unofficially 26th. And then we get a thing if you go look at the NASCAR app, it says 18th. And then it was like an hour later, I think, finally they put together the thing and it said 20th. So
it was all messed up, but I'll tell you, it was funny, having MRN, I think it was over the speakers. We were near Victory Lane at this point, and they're confused because at that point, timing and scoring for some weird reason was showing Kyle Busch in the lead. And MRN's like, oh, hold on. It says Kyle Busch crossed the line first. And I'm like, Kyle Busch was nowhere near the front. Like at that point, he got collected in that crash really fast and never even made it past the start finish line. So Reddick goes on and celebrates and he squeaks through though. And I think, listen to Denny's podcast on the way home. And Denny actually brings up the Daytona 500 when Ryan's pushing Ryan Newman and Newman spins. And Denny says, this was really reminiscent of when I stuck through, the two Ryans, getting collected and winning that race. And I'm like, yeah. And then I just watched, the race replay again. And I'm like, yeah, man, it really looked a lot like that. The other thing that shocked me, listening to all this content on the 7-hour drive back home today, the part of that day was listening to the XM NASCAR channel. And it wasn't a ton, but like the amount of people that called in and were mad at Brad. And I'm like, Brad's like held his position. He did make, one move to the outside. He came back to the bottom, held his position and took the push from the 10. And the 34 came back down across his nose. Like what, what was he supposed to do?
You're trying to win the race. You try to move around him. You remember the triple block, what Ryan called a triple block last year? Same situation. The guy's in front of you wiggling all over the place and you're trying to get around him. At some point, that guy's going to get dumped.
Yeah.
Because that guy in front of you has lost the momentum. He's not getting a proper push from anybody and you've got momentum. So you've got to go. And I'm sorry that everybody feels that way that, maybe they love Loves that much in the 34 car, but he was gonna get dumped sooner or later. I mean, maybe he gets lucky and he pulls off and gets squared up but he didn't. And he wasn't squared up because he was wiggling so much by that point. He may have really literally had fishtailed himself in front of somebody. So yeah, you can't be blaming the 6 for that. I guess, we were talking about who finished where. If you looked up the scoring pylon, maybe you would have found out what position your favorite driver was in.
Lots of great jokes about that. I think Carson Hocevar has been on it all weekend, and I think he commented on Jeff Gluck's was it a good race poll and mentioned like he didn't know where he finished because he couldn't see the scoring pylon. Lots of great.
Yeah, that I didn't mean to start arguments with people, and they were pretty much civil. I will say that much, but some of the things that people were pointing out were things that weren't even nothing to do with what I was saying. And I think there were a lot of outrage just to have outrage. It was like, but when you're at the track, that pylon is only correct at the start finish line. Right? It doesn't move constantly. Okay. It's even the TV one shows you when a guy moves a position or two during the lap. Okay. Yeah. But at the track, it doesn't show you anything until they cross the start finish. Then it readjusts because of where they cross the start finish. So if you're at the track and you're watching the race, your guy could be 15th at the start finish, all the way up to 3rd on the backstretch, all the way down to 7th on 3 and 4, all the way back to 15th by the time they come back around. It changes that much in a super speedway. So to me, that pylon, I've been there. I said this. I've been there twice last year, and I don't think I looked at it once.
Texas, and 100% understand.
Yes.
Talladega, no, it's useless.
No, it's useless at Talladega. That's the point I was trying to make, is that certain types of tracks, when you're watching a 1.5 miles or even a smaller race, you can lose track of your guy in what position he's in, and that scoring pylon will become important. Bad thing about them is a lot of them are so short too. They show you the top 10, and then maybe the last 2 or 3 positions of the bottom pylon rotate. So it takes you a while sometimes if your guy's not in the top 10 to see where he's at. But and this became a discussion too, is the phone service at these tracks, because
Yeah.
somebody made it a point to say that that you can look at your phone. And of course, I think Denny Hamlin jumped all over that. Oh, you're going to the track, look at your phone, blah, blah, blah. But I was just at Martinsville. Okay. And Martinsville has their Wi-Fi act together. I don't know, we sat literally where there was one of the units right in the row below us, so we had, right on top of a Wi-Fi unit, but they had enough of it there where even when the regular phone service shut down, I was able to text you guys wherever you were. We were actually able to get pictures through to each other, which never happens at a track. And so it basically said, get NASCAR, get your act together and get your Wi-Fi together. If you do that, we used it. We used the NASCAR app. Mind you, the timing and scoring is a little behind because it's bouncing off a satellite to get back to you. But there are many points in times at Martinsville where you totally lose track of where you are in position because you've got lappers in between lappers and so who are you actually racing? The guy I'm in 8th and who's the guy in 7th, and I was able to look down at my phone and go, oh yeah, he's chasing the 10 car or whoever, and I can see, okay, well now I'm looking at the track. I'm going, okay, so he's got 3 lappers between him and the 10 car. It worked perfectly, So if I couldn't see that pylon, or if my guy was running 15th and he's not on that pylon, I was able to use the NASCAR app to figure it out. So, they poo-pooed that too. The people were poo-pooing that, but the truth is get better. If all these tracks will get better at it and get us better Wi-Fi, you can use the app as a tool. It's so funny. Michael Jordan is part of DraftKings, right? That's he's part of that company, I believe. And all these betting services totally rely on Wi-Fi at all these stadiums, the NFL football stadiums, the basketball arenas, the baseball stadiums, because you can in-sport bet during a game on every weird little thing. Sometimes whether or not it's going to be a running play the next play. Okay. And those sports have recognized that and made sure that all their arenas are pretty much up to snuff as Wi-Fi goes, because they want their fans to be able to have that part of the experience. So what if NASCAR, needs to, whether the track owners of the 2 different companies, they need to get it together and make sure that all their tracks have got their Wi-Fi together. It's always been a complaint about cell service to begin with. And my wife has Verizon, and she has pretty good cell service during the game or during a race. I've got AT&T and I don't, and it shouldn't be like that. So if the one thing that you could do to make it better for everybody is just make sure that you've got better Wi-Fi, then I think that's actually a good idea. Forget this little thing that Denny said about looking at your phones. People are going to look at their phones from now on to the end of eternity. Somehow we figured out technology to put a computer in our hands and be able to look at the World Wide Web on in our hands. So that's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, was that if they do want us to use our phones as a tool, one, every track has to have the most amazing Wi-Fi access ever. I know that they're even positioning. I mean, if you have the NASCAR Tracks app, it's like telling you select tracks throughout the year, you can get free access to the scanners. That's great. Except for the scanner on the app is going to be 2 laps behind. And I'm like, so to me, that's kind of useless. So I'm going to keep my racing electronic scanner or whatever scanner, you prefer at the track until, maybe the phone catches up to it. Because, even at home, watching the race, I spend a lot of time at the beginning of the race getting my scanner and even the in-car camera synced up with my TV. And it's kind of a science and an art to getting it to work. And then if something crashes, I have to start all over again. But I would be so upset if, they're like, yeah, just use we're not going to support the radios anymore. Just use your phone app. And when I'm 2 laps behind, it'd be so frustrating. Cool thing about Talladega, you being an AT&T user, I have AT&T as well, riding the bus through the infield to get to the garage experience. They had, much like at Daytona, they had lots of Verizon, pop-up towers all around the infield. For some reason at Talladega, whatever deal they have, they're all AT&T, and I was golden through the whole weekend as far as cell service went. And I cannot remember the last time I was at a racetrack with AT&T where I didn't even have to worry about Wi-Fi. So that was kind of was kind of incredible. So
Cool.
those are our rants on that. Certain
Yeah.
tracks keep the pylons, other tracks like Talladega, Daytona, they don't really matter too much. And the more important thing, circling
Yeah.
back to the finish, so
Yeah.
what, Ryan ends up 20th, I think, is
20th. That's what I
20th
have.
position. He gets stage points in that first stage, so it's not too bad of a day. I do want to point out, so Ryan holds serve in the NASCAR Cup Series point standings. These are just the overall standings, so this isn't going to count, all the guys that have already locked themselves into the playoffs. But seventh position, 57 points back of the leader, who's Kyle Larson. So it goes Larson's in first, followed by Truex, Chase Elliott, William Byron, Tyler Reddick, Denny Hamlin. Again, Ryan Blaney in seventh, Ty Gibbs, Ross Chastain, and Alex Bowman, who's had a great couple of weeks, moves up 4 spots into the top 10 now. Bubba Wallace falls out of the top 10, and Christopher Bell falls out of the top 10. So Ryan, 57 points out of the points lead, which, at this point in the season, still, pretty great. A couple good races, he can, he wins a race, has great stage points. He can leap all the way back up to the top. I wanted to note, with 77 stage points, Ryan still has the second most stage points earned all season long. Now it's a big gap up to Kyle Larson, who has 110. So, but I just thought it was interesting. Ryan still with everything still ends up having the second most stage points earned this year so far. So 57 points out of the lead, not too shabby considering it was really kind of just a weird day, a weird race. I feel like there's mistakes kind of made all around, and then strategies didn't play out. Weird cautions happen, speeding penalties. It just kind of throw things for a loop. The fuel saving mode.
Well,
that's
I'm
sure everyone was
to.
a little frustrated. I'm sure.
That's what I was going to get to, the fuel saving mode. We didn't really talk about that just yet to the extent we should. Fuel saving mode is great racing for TV and live until you actually race. Once they start racing, it's not 3 wide anymore. 3 wide, you try 3 wide, but the high lane doesn't work. We saw this at the end of the race. We saw this with Ryan trying to push that lane. It just doesn't work. The third lane just does not, because the other 2 lanes have way too much energy. Nobody can jump on a line and start a third lane unless like a third of the field did it. If a third of the field did it at one time, like here comes 10 to 15 cars all the way to the high lane, then maybe you would have gotten it. But 4 or 5 cars try to start that lane, try to side draft to gain position, plus the pushes. They're not organized enough. So the third lane does not work when you're actually racing for position or for the win. What can be done? Because this ended up being the real discussion with some of these post-race podcasts.
All day. That's all I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. And the truth is I don't know if you've heard this or not during the day, but my favorite thing is to figure out a way to separate the cars. There's danger is part of the problem. They're worried about, injuries and safety and cars flying out of the track or whatever. But figure out a way to separate the cars. Let's not pack race anymore. Let's just, not to totally take the spacer plate off of there, but let's make it a big enough difference so that when you make a move around somebody, it's because you've got a little bit better car or the handling is better and you can make a move. And it's gotten to the point, like you said, with the fuel mileage part of it, where we're all worried about how short a pit stop we can have to end up in front of somebody else, and it worked. Don't get me wrong. This worked extremely well for Ryan last year, and he did it. He executed it in the fall race. But I think really truthfully, if you want to do something to help the super speedway racing not be like this, you need to separate the cars. You need to get them where they're not all in a pack anymore.
Yeah, a lot of people are really fixated on fixing the fuel mileage thing. Let's change the amount of stages. Let's add a stage. Let's take a stage away. Let's take all the stages away. So that way they aren't worried about saving fuel. That's great, but it all comes back to the car, because you saw that last run, everybody had all the fuel they needed and nobody could go anywhere and they were all going hard. So, and I think you said that a little bit. So it comes back to the car again. It comes back to the package. It comes back to how big the spoiler is. It comes back to how much horsepower they have. It comes back to the fact that they have this high spoiler and they've put so much drag in the car that you can't make moves like you used to. So don't worry so much. I'm just imploring people not to worry so much about the fuel saving thing. Like that's just what they've gone to in an effort to get manufacturer track position, because you can't necessarily pass and make moves. So it all comes back to the car. I mean, I don't know. Like you said, I mean, they would have to do something. Denny talked about again, which he's said multiple times on his show, like to just at some point forget about trying to save the team's money. Give us a super speedway specific engine again, so we don't have to have the tall spoiler. We can take some of the drag off the car and let us be able to move around and make passes that are based on skill and driver ability and making runs and things like that. So I feel like there is going to be a point when NASCAR is going to maybe ditch this idea of cost savings. Maybe not this year, maybe not even next year, but at some point say, okay, we're going to go back to having multiple aero packages and different horsepower engines. And because the thing is that, Denny points out is, they're running the same horsepower that they run throughout the rest of the year. Before on super speedways, they were running like engines with 300 something horsepower, and not right now they have 600 plus. So they have to throw up this huge spoiler on there to slow the cars down because they're afraid of cars flipping over and going too fast. So don't focus on the fuel saving thing. They could get rid of the stages, change the stages. Then great. Now they're all just going to run 2x2 and not go anywhere. So it's just while they're all running, they're going all out. So again, I think Kosovar and part of that Jeff Gluck comment had said that, they were all going hard on that last part and nobody could move. And Kyle Busch had an interesting, tweet after the race as well, basically saying that he hated the car because, if you stay in line, you'll finish where you are. If you try to make a move, you're going to finish last. So as it is what it is. We move on mostly. Again, Ryan Blaney 7th in the NASCAR Cup Series point standings, 57 points back to the leader after that 20th place finish at Talladega Super Speedway. We're going to be moving on to Dover this week, but before we do that, clean up one last thing from the weekend at Talladega, and that is the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League. And quite honestly, I don't even know. This is the first time I'm pulling this up. Not too shabby for me this week. 22nd overall in points earned with 146 points for me. My starting lineup: Austin Cindric got me 33 points. Kyle Busch got me 16. It was looking a lot better until the last lap. Chris Buescher got me 16. Alex Bowman got me 33, pretty decent. Brad Keselowski got me 38. And I had Daniel Hemrick in the garage. I do believe I had Keselowski in the garage initially, and I did have time to swap that live at the track. So that was a pretty big points. Well, it was a 10-point swing for me. Hemrick actually didn't have that bad of a day. So left 28 points in the garage, but struggled in the featured matchups. I picked Blaney over Elliott. That was wrong. I picked Dillon over LaJoy. That was wrong. Even though LaJoy finished, slid across the finish line on his driver's door. Picked Jones over Suarez. That was wrong. And then I picked Gregson over Gibbs, and that was right. So I was 1 of 4 on the featured matchups. And again, finished 22nd overall in points earned at Talladega.
I tried to play this game where I looked at stage points as they were going, because coming that way, if somebody had more stage points than somebody else, then I put that person in the garage by the end of stage 2. So that's kind of what I was doing, and it didn't really work very well. But by that point, Christopher Bell had his issues. So I ended up having Wallace, Gibbs, Logano, Byron, and Ryan in the lineup. And Logano winning a stage, that helped a bunch. Byron ended up being the second best point guy on the day. Bubba didn't do me very good at all. And then the same thing with the matchups. I really had I had Ryan. I did have Corey over Dillon, so I had one right there. I had Suarez over Eric Jones, which is good. And then I did have Gibbs and Gregson finished third. So half and half there, mixed bag. It was really just a tough weekend because you didn't know, like the big one, didn't really happen, but there were a couple incidences that affected my guys. So I was trying to play games, trying to figure out who to leave in the lineup.
So let's take a look now at the top 10 in points earned at Talladega in the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League. In 10th, JD Racing with 162 points. Three-way tie for 7th with Big Burn, Matt O, and Frank Fan 12, 165. Tie for 5th with Little 7474 and Penske Fan Scott, 167 points. 4th, No Hesitation, 173. Tie for 2nd with hashtag LGM and Supermod, 176 points. And Monday's Girl 18, 184 points total. First in points earned, wins the weekend, Talladega Superspeedway in the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League. Let's take a look now at the overall standings. I am now moving up slightly. 28th position, Team Blaney host Adam, 1,755 points. Mez 12 knocks down the leaderboard a little bit further this weekend. 20th position, 1,794 points. Take a look now at the top 10 in the overall standings. Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League. Charlie Abu, 1,865 in 10th. 9th is Montana 12 Fan, 1,871. 8th is Pocono Lady, 1,880. 7th is Blaney or Bust, 1,898. 6th is Dr. Race Chaser, 1,910. 5th, Alyssa C, 1,917. 4th is Penske Fan 24, 1,920. 3rd is Go Larson, 1,930. 2nd is Frank Fan 12, 1,931. Leading the way in the first position, overall standings, Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League is Blaney-Act 10, 1,936 points. So a 5-point cushion there for the league, for the lead in the league for Blaney-Act 10. And that brings us now to the Monster Mile in the NASCAR on TV report for Dover Motor Speedway. It is the Worth 400. Ryan Blaney will be sporting the Worth colors this weekend. And I mentioned teammate Joey Logano has won a couple of Pennzoil 400s and Pennzoil whatevers at Las Vegas and things. It's time for Blaney to go to victory lane in the Worth 400 in the Worth sponsored car. One of the cooler paint schemes of the year. So kicks off Saturday, April 27th, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, the NASCAR Cup Series qualifying at Dover Motor Speedway on FS1. Followed at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, you have the NASCAR Xfinity Series Bet Rivers 200 at Dover Motor Speedway, also on FS1. Sunday, April 28th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the NASCAR Cup Series Worth 400 at Dover Motor Speedway on FS1. Take a look at Ryan Blaney's career statistics at Dover. 13 starts, an average start of 11.5, an average finish of 18.2. He has 1 DNF, 1 top 5, 3 top 10s. Also worth noting that Ryan Blaney went to victory lane at Dover in 2017 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. So he does have a Miles the Monster trophy from his Xfinity Series win. Steve, can he get it done this weekend at Dover in the NASCAR Cup Series in the namesake car for Worth at the Worth 400?
The last time we went to a short, well, this is not, technically not a short track, I guess, but a short track with concrete. We had the pole. Do we know what tire Goodyear is bringing?
This is a good question.
Because it could be 400 miles worth of tire wear and tire conservation if they bring that tire back. Which now, if you're prepared for it, would be very interesting because totally would change the way you set up the cars, and the guys would be a little more ready for it. And it would still be, there would still be wear, but it wouldn't wear as fast, maybe. But I don't know. I'm just guessing there. I have no idea. I don't think at a mile track, the speed they're going, they would probably bring that tire, just because when they lose one of those tires, it's a little bit different impact than it would be at a half mile. So I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see what the practice looks like over the weekend, and hopefully they line up near the front there. Go for it.
I think I said it the last 3 years on the podcast, so this will be a fourth time. Dover Motor Speedway is always one of my favorites to play throughout the years, from when I was a kid all the way up until, iRacing on, the NASCAR video games or the simulator versions, because it's just such a cool experience. And it just, it has to be really interesting for the drivers, just the load that they get into the corners, high speed, high bank, concrete. It's just always a fun track. So again, if you want to tune in this weekend, Dover Motor Speedway, Saturday, April 27th, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, NASCAR Cup Series qualifying at Dover. Sunday, April 28th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the Worth 400. Hopefully it is worth the watch. It is worth tuning into, and it's worth the wait for Ryan Blaney to get his first victory of 2024. And let's get it done at Dover. Well, Steve, I think that pretty much wraps up this week's episode of the Team Blaney podcast. I want to thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You can interact with us on Facebook and X at Team Blaney, and on Instagram and TikTok at team.blaney. We also like to encourage you to support the Ryan Blaney Family Foundation. Ryan's official charitable organization benefits brain health causes like UPMC Sports Medicine and the Alzheimer's Association. To learn more, visit ryanblaneyfamilyfoundation.org or follow them on Facebook, X, and Instagram. So for my co-host Steve Mez, I'm Adam Rogers. We'll catch you next time right here on the Team Blaney podcast.
Good night, Brussels and Netherlands. Check out the TikTok.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.